This is part 5 of my series of videos covering the building of the Three Nite P-30 rubber-powered free-flight model airplane. In this video, I'm going to show and describe how to cover the wing, fuselage, and horizontal stabilizer with tissue. Traditionally, balsa wood models have been covered with tissue and finished with nitrate dope. Over the past few decades, some outdoor models have been covered with plastic film. This film is typically referred to as mylar film, and it's very thin. For rubber-powered free-flight models, it's not appropriate to use covering that's used on radio control models like Coverite and Monocoat. Those coverings are way too heavy for this type of model. That is a free-flight rubber-powered model. Tissue covering and film covering each have their own advantages and disadvantages. I think that covering a free-flight model with tissue is much easier for a beginner. You don't have to deal with heat-activated adhesives, for example. For a long time, balsa wood models have been covered with Japanese tissue, and in particular a tissue called Isaki, spelled E as in Edward, S as in Sam, A as in apple, K as in kite, I as in ice, Isaki tissue. This was a very lightweight tissue, very strong, made in Japan for decades. However, unfortunately, in the last year or two, that business is no longer producing tissue. It's highly recommended that you still cover with other forms of Japanese tissue that are almost as good and slightly heavier than the original Isaki tissue. I can recommend Asuka tissue, Asuka, from Volare Products, and also Mount Fuji tissue from Easy Built Models. Recently, I ran across this new product called Easy Tissue from a company called Deluxe Materials. This is a company in England that produces a number of adhesives and other products for free flight models, and I found those products to be very high in quality and usefulness. I have not tried Easy Tissue yet, but I assume it would probably be very good given the reputation of that company. In this video, I'm going to be covering with what I believe to be Isaki tissue. It comes in a variety of colors, or it used to, and the tissue is typically sold in rectangular sheets that measure about 23 inches by about 17 inches. So here's a sheet of Isaki tissue. I've already cut out in the lower left corner a section of the tissue that's probably to be used on the stabilizer of my Three Nite P-30 that I'm building. Japanese tissue, whether it be Isaki tissue and probably Asuka and Mount Fuji tissue, have a grain, and the grain can be determined by tearing in the corner as shown in this picture. The grain, if you tear with the grain, the tear will be very easy, and as shown here, if you try to tear across grain, it'll be very, very difficult to do. Typically, the grain runs parallel to the longer dimension of the sheet. I understand that the Japanese tissue shrinks in a direction perpendicular to the grain, and so it's very important how you orient the tissue on the wing, the fuselage, and the stabilizer. So on the wing and the stabilizer, the grain should be oriented span-wise. In other words, from tip to tip of the wing or horizontal stabilizer. For the fuselage, the grain should be oriented parallel to the longitudinal axis of the fuselage. By orienting the tissue in this manner, when it's shrunk, you'll get the greatest torsional strength of those structures and also the greatest resistance to warping, particularly in the wing and the stabilizer. So here's a picture of the wing of the Three Nite P-30 I'm building. Um, the wing tips are cut off, it looks like in this video, but this is after the tissue has been applied and shrunk with isopropyl alcohol using a sprayer. I have not yet sealed it with any kind of coating. I recommend you start covering the stabilizer first because it's the easiest. And here you can see I've already cut out a square or rectangle of the red tissue, and I'm about to adhere it to the bottom of the horizontal stabilizer. There are lots of different ways and techniques to cover balsa wood models with tissue. Most of them are good. There's variations. It's really a matter of personal choice and who was your mentor, etc. If you go to the Easy Built Models website, under the building tips, they have an article entitled Techniques and Tips for Covering Models. I recommend that you read that before you start covering your Three Nite P-30 with tissue. Japanese tissue typically has a shiny side or a glossy side and a rougher side. I recommend that you glue the shiny side to the structures. That is, you leave the rougher side on the outer side. I'm not sure why this is the case, but the experts that I have consulted with and learned from have always recommended that technique. So you want about a 1/4 inch overlap so that you can wrap the tissue around the leading edge and trailing edge and the outer ribs. I like to adhere the tissue to the frames with a 50-50 mixture of Elmer's white glue and water using a small brush. Over the last decade or so, the use of glue stick to adhere tissue to balsa wood frames has become very popular. If you're going to use this technique, I highly recommend the Uhu brand of glue stick. I think this is a German product. The interesting part about it is that it goes on purple so you can see where it is, but when it dries clear. Tom Hallman, who's probably one of the best stick and tissue builders and flyers in the world, who builds absolutely beautiful models, uses glue stick. And he likes it because you can brush it with rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, to loosen it up if you need to. And it dries fairly quickly. Recently, I discovered this product called tissue paste from Deluxe Materials. Again, this is the company in the United Kingdom. This product I found was absolutely outstanding, easy to dispense, good drying time, good adherence, in many ways better than my 50-50 mixture of white glue and water. I believe you can buy this product from Amazon. This picture shows the tissue that I have glued to the underside of the horizontal stabilizer. Some modelers pre-shrink the tissue. That's not necessary for the Three Nite P-30. In fact, I don't like to do that for larger models. I want the full strength that is imparted when the tissue is shrunk for the first time. The reason for pre-shrinking is that oftentimes in scale models, the structure is very delicate and you don't want changes in humidity introducing warps. Now in this picture, I'm applying the tissue to the top side of the horizontal stabilizer. And you can see again we have the about a 1/4 inch overlap, and that's going to be wrapped around and glued to the leading edge and trailing edge of the wing. Also note that I've gone and made little slits with scissors on the ends of the rectangle because that's where it's curved, and this helps you tuck that tissue down over the ribs. I like to shrink the tissue with isopropyl alcohol. Actually, that product is 30% water. I think it has something to do with the chemistry. You can't have pure isopropyl alcohol at ambient temperature and pressure. On the left is a little squeeze bottle, an aerosol pump squeeze bottle that I use to spray the isopropyl alcohol onto the tissue. You want to wait several hours or even overnight to make sure that whatever glue you've used to adhere the tissue to the balsa wood framing has completely dried. This picture shows the tissue. It's kind of rumpled after I've sprayed it with the isopropyl alcohol. Notice that the horizontal stabilizer is secured with pairs of magnets at each end. This raises it off the building board and allows it to breathe and dry. It also ensures that during the tissue shrinking, the horizontal stabilizer will stay flat. In other words, it won't have any warps induced into it. Unintended warps in any flying surface of a free flight model airplane are very, very bad. They'll make it difficult to trim for stable flight. If the alcohol has been applied at room temperature, you're going to find that the tissue dries very, very quickly, 10 to 15 minutes probably at the most. Skipping ahead, here's the horizontal stabilizer, fuselage, and the wing after they've been covered, shrunk with alcohol, and then sprayed with Krylon clear spray. Tissue cover models need to have a sealant applied to the tissue to resist warping and to lessen the penetration of moisture and through humidity and otherwise. So really, I reverse those. The spray, whatever you put on the finish, helps prevent warping because it impairs the ability of moisture to get into the tissue. In this picture, you can see the Krylon clear spray that I used. Unfortunately, it has quite a bit of odor. There's one version that has less odor. I don't know why I didn't buy that. Maybe it wasn't available. Within the past few years, a water-based dope has become commercially available, again from Deluxe Materials, that United Kingdom company. It's called Easy Dope. It's available on Amazon. It's a quite large bottle, actually. It's 3 or 4 inches tall. This is applied with a soft brush and definitely thin it out ahead of time. I found that the best results are achieved with a mixture of 30% Easy Dope and 70% water. Sometimes you get a little streaking, and you've got to be careful that towards the trailing edge where the tissue gets close, that is the tissue on the underside and the top side of the wing and stab, you got to be careful that those don't come together and bond together. The way to avoid that, of course, is to apply the Easy Dope water mixture very sparingly. Again, 30% Easy Dope, 70% water. Very fluffy, soft brush. Don't want to damage the tissue. And be careful around the edges. I want to emphasize that I should have said this earlier, you only glue the tissue to the perimeter of the frames, and you don't glue it to the spars or the ribs or anything like that. You do glue it to the outer ribs and to the leading edge and trailing edge, but you don't glue it to the structure in between. You want to allow the tissue to shrink. Traditionally, tissue covered models have been finished off with nitrate dope. And I wanted to show you this picture because my friend Don Bardick does the absolute best tissue covering on models that I've ever seen. He uses a 50-50 blend of regular clear nitrate dope and non-tautening clear nitrate dope. Once he mixes those together, uh, he sprays it with a sprayer and uses 2 coats. Um, Again, there's going to be a lot of smell. So if you have a spouse or significant other that doesn't like harsh chemical smells, you're probably not going to be using this technique. Let's move on to covering the wing. The wing frame is about 29.75 inches in length, so that's way too long to cover with a single piece of Japanese tissue, so you have to cover it in sections. And this gives you a chance to become an artist. And you can see here I've covered the bottom of the outermost bay on one end of the wing. Before you do much covering of the wing, when you've got equal amounts of tissue on both sides of the center line of the wing, you want to balance it on a ruler and see if one side of the wing is heavier than the other. In this particular case, uh, the right side of the wing, pilot's view, was a little bit too light. So I added some ballast, the minimal amount, gluing it to the inside of the outermost wing rib. You don't want to start out with an airplane that's heavy on one side because it'll want to tend to turn that way. You want everything balanced out and then trim it. So in this picture, you can see I've made more progress on the underside of the wing. I'm using a checkered Isaki tissue that I have for this bay, these 2 bays. And in this picture, I've completed covering the bottom side of the wing. Notice I left the inner bay uncovered because that's going to be on top of the fuselage. When I fly my outdoor models, I usually include an RF transmitter for locating the model, and I'm going to have a little balsa wood box in this area right on the CG so that I can fly the model with or without the locator in place. So in this view, I flipped the wing over so it's now sitting on its underside, and you see here 2 sections of 1/32 thick balsa wood sheet. This is A grain, so it bends really easily. And I'm going to cover this top of this center bay here. And here's the center bay after being covered. You can see it's just a continuous piece here. I've just glued this with thin Duco or ambroid cement, and it's going to hold real well. I think I've sanded here to make it a little nicer in terms of contouring into the leading and trailing edge. This picture shows the reason for covering the top bay with balsa wood sheeting. Um, the wing hold down rubber bands are going to crisscross over that area, and tissue there would take a lot of abuse when you mount and dismount the wing from the fuselage, actually from the wing saddle, which is discussed in a different video, part 7 actually. I just want to point out that the wing here is skewed to the right. It should be centered before you fly. That is, scooted to the left in the picture. In this picture, I've covered a whole big area in the middle of the wing with 1 sheet of Isaki on the top, and it goes directly over that sheeted area. I painted all this with the 50-50 mixture of white glue and water so that the tissue will be firmly bonded to it. And this picture shows the wing after the top has been completely covered. It's wrinkled, of course, but all these wrinkles will go away, or mostly, when I spray it with isopropyl alcohol. And here's a picture of the wing after the tissue has been shrunk and the wing has been sprayed with clear Krylon. So next we're moving on to covering the fuselage. I think it's best to start covering the sides first, and using whatever adhesive you choose, either the 50-50 white glue and water, the Uhu glue stick, or the special paste, tissue paste from Deluxe Materials. Again, the fuselage is about 28 inches long, so you can't cover it with just one um, piece of tissue. You're going to want the grain to run lengthwise on the fuselage. So this view shows part of the fuselage being covered. And again, the areas here, you want to generally do it on the perimeter, but here, this large area and this large area, I completely coat with this glue mixture. Notice there's quite a bit of overlap here, but that doesn't matter because I'm going to trim this away. And here I'm covering the rear end of the fuselage. You can smooth out these wrinkles when the adhesive is still wet, the 50-50 mixture of white glue and water. So after all the glue is dried, take a brand new X-Acto blade and you can trim the excess away very easily. And there's the fuselage after the excess tissue has been trimmed away with the X-Acto knife. And you finish off the other side the same way. This picture shows the process of covering the underside of the fuselage. Here you're going to want to cut strips of tissue that give you just about 1/8 inch overlap so that you can run glue along that overlap and then fold it around over the tissue that covers the sides. This picture shows how I've tapered this to get the proper amount of overlap, this section of tissue. This picture shows that I've left the area under the forward motor peg location open so that when I'm inserting and installing the rubber motor, I can see the end there on the stuffer stick and push the aluminum motor peg through it. In this view, you can see I've left two of the bays open on the top of the fuselage. This is the approximate location of the wing. When I do all the balancing of the model to determine the optimum location of the wing to get the CG where it should be, I may have to cover part of this a little bit more so that it's not uncovered with the wing in the right position. The reason I have this open is just so I can see the rubber motor and also the little box that I build in the underside of the open bay in the middle of the wing. That little box that holds the RF transmitter may project down a little bit into the fuselage, so I want some area to receive that. So after the fuselage is tissue covered, you go ahead and spray it with the alcohol mixture, and then after the tissue is shrunk, you spray. I sprayed all three of these components at the same time with the clear Krylon. Here is a picture of my spray booth. I've cut open a trash bag and just laid it on the bottom of the bathtub. Have windows open on both sides of the bedroom that adjoins this bathroom to get rid of some of the fumes. Actually, there's a window in the bathroom as well. So really, that's all there is to covering and finishing the wing, fuselage, and horizontal stabilizer of the Three Nite P-30 with Japanese tissue. One admonition, don't be tempted to use domestic tissue, the kind of stuff that comes in gift wrapping. It's extremely weak, very heavy, and it's just not suitable for airplanes. Um, Easy Built Models does sell a brand of tissue that they call domestic, which apparently has gotten some good reviews. It's available in a wide variety of colors, and that's kind of neat. I've never used it. I think I would recommend the Japanese tissue Isaki if you could get it. There's still some around, and if you can't get Isaki tissue, then use Japanese tissue, either the Asuka tissue from Volare Products, or the Mount Fuji tissue from Easy Built, or that Easy Tissue product from Deluxe may be just the ticket. And that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching.